The stars were cold and silent as Commander Una Park sat alone on the bridge of the exploration vessel. Horizon's Edge. Her crew slept in their quarters, while the ship drifted through the empty space near the Orion Nebula. It was a routine mission. Nothing special. Nothing dangerous. Just another survey of dead rocks floating in the darkness. Una liked these quiet moments. She had served in the fleet for 15 years, and she had learned to enjoy the peace between assignments. The universe was vast and lonely, and sometimes that loneliness felt like freedom. The communication panel beeped softly. Una frowned and leaned forward in her chair. They were far from any shipping lanes or communication relays. No one should be sending signals out here. She touched the screen and saw the data streaming across it. The signal was encrypted using a language that humanity had cracked 30 years ago, but pretended not to understand. It was the language of the conclave of elder races, the ancient civilizations that ruled the galaxy. Una knew she should ignore it. The conclave did not like humans listening to their private conversations. But curiosity was a human weakness, and Una had never been good at following rules. She ran the decryption program and watched the words appear on her screen. At first, she did not understand what she was reading. The document was long and filled with strange terms and references to species she had never heard of. But then she found the section about humanity, and her blood turned to ice. The document was called the Extinction Schedule. It was a list of species that the conclave had decided were too dangerous to exist. Each entry included a timeline for elimination and a brief explanation of the reasons. Humanity was on the list. They had approximately 200 years left. The reasoning was simple and cold. Humans were too adaptable. They changed too quickly. They were unpredictable and aggressive. If allowed to mature, they might threaten the order that the elder races had maintained for millions of years. Better to remove them now, while they were still weak. Una read the words 3 times before she believed them. The conclave was going to kill humanity. Not with war or weapons, but with quiet efficiency. They would isolate humans, weaken them, and then eliminate them like a gardener pulling weeds. She sat in silence for a long time. The stars outside her window seemed darker now, more hostile. The universe she had loved suddenly felt like a trap. When her crew woke up, Una told them nothing. She smiled and gave orders and pretended everything was normal. But inside, her mind was racing. She needed to tell someone. She needed to warn humanity. But who would believe her? 3 weeks later, the Horizon's Edge returned to Earth. Una went straight to the office of Admiral Taiho Kim, her old mentor and the commander of humanity's hidden military fleet. Taiho was 70 years old, but his eyes were still sharp and clear. He had spent his entire life preparing for threats that most humans refused to believe existed. He listened to Una's report without interrupting, and when she finished, he simply nodded. "I always suspected," he said quietly. "The elder races look at us like we are insects. I knew they would not let us grow too strong. What do we do?" Una asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Taiho stood up and walked to his window. Outside, the city stretched toward the horizon, full of lights and life. Millions of people going about their days, completely unaware that their extinction had already been scheduled. "We cannot fight them," Taiho said. "The conclave has technology we cannot even understand. Their fleets could destroy our entire civilization in a single day. Then we surrender?" Una felt anger rising in her chest. "No," Taiho turned to face her. "We find another way. The conclave has been predicting the rise and fall of species for millions of years. They have models and calculations that account for every variable. They know exactly how we will respond to this threat. Then how can we surprise them?" Taiho smiled, and for a moment he looked young again. by becoming something their models cannot predict. Over the next few months, Taiho assembled a secret council. He brought together the greatest minds humanity had produced: scientists, generals, philosophers, and strategists. They met in hidden bunkers and secure facilities, far from the eyes of the conclave spies. Among them was Dr. Hannah Lee, a quantum physicist who had spent her career studying probability and the nature of choice. She was small and quiet, with gray hair and gentle eyes, but when she spoke, everyone listened. The conclave's predictions are based on patterns, she explained to the council. They observe how species behave over thousands of years and build models that forecast future actions. These models are incredibly accurate because most species follow predictable paths. They expand, they fight, they consume resources, and eventually they either destroy themselves or become a threat that must be eliminated. And humanity follows this pattern? Asked one of the generals. Yes, Hannah admitted. Our history shows all the classic signs. We are aggressive, competitive, and hungry for growth. The conclave's models probably predict that we will either tear ourselves apart through internal conflict or attempt to expand too quickly and give them an excuse to intervene. So, what do we do? Yuna asked. She had been invited to join the council because of her discovery. Hannah smiled. We become unpredictable. We do things that their models cannot anticipate. We make choices that defy logic and statistics. The room was silent. Finally, Taiho spoke. You want us to become chaos. Not chaos, Hannah corrected. Creativity, hope, irrationality. These are things that the elder races eliminated from themselves long ago. They optimized their civilizations until every action was calculated and efficient. They forgot how to be surprised. And you think we can surprise them? Hannah looked around the room at the gathered humans. Scientists who dreamed of impossible things. Soldiers who fought battles they could not win. Leaders who refused to accept defeat. I think surprising people is what humans do best. Taiho nodded slowly. He understood what Hannah was proposing. It was insane and dangerous and might not work. But it was also the most human thing he had ever heard. We will call it Project Rewrite, he announced. Our mission is to change the future that the conclave has planned for us. We will not fight them with weapons. We will fight them with choices they cannot predict. The council members looked at each other with a mixture of fear and hope. They were facing the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Beings who had watched empires rise and fall for millions of years. The odds of success were almost zero. But almost zero was not zero. And humans had always been good at beating impossible odds. Yuna Park walked out of that meeting with a new purpose. She had discovered humanity's death sentence, but now she would help write a different ending. The conclave had predicted their fall, but they had made one mistake. They had underestimated what humans would do when they had nothing left to lose. The stars still watched from above, cold and ancient and indifferent. But somewhere in the darkness, a small spark of defiance had been lit. And sparks, as the elder races would eventually learn, had a way of becoming fires that burned through even the most careful predictions. The war for humanity's survival had begun. Not with weapons or fleets, but with a simple refusal to accept fate. Project Rewrite was born. 5 years had passed since Yuna Park discovered the extinction schedule. 5 years of secrets and lies and desperate hope. Project Rewrite had grown from a small council into a hidden network that stretched across human space. Thousands of people now worked in secret bases on dead moons and empty asteroids, all dedicated to a single impossible goal: changing the future. Lieutenant Junho Choi did not know any of this when he received his transfer orders. He was 26 years old, a tactical officer on a patrol ship guarding the outer colonies. He was good at his job but not exceptional. He had never won any awards or received special recognition. He was, by all measures, completely ordinary. That was exactly why they wanted him. The shuttle took him to a small station, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant. There were no markings on the station, no identification codes, nothing to suggest it was anything other than abandoned mining equipment. But inside, Jun-Ho found a facility filled with the most advanced technology he had ever seen. Dr. Hannah Lee met him at the entrance. She was older now, her hair completely white, but her eyes still held that same gentle intelligence that had convinced the council to support her mad plan. "Welcome to Project Rewrite," she said. "I am sure you have many questions." Jun-Ho had exactly one question. "Why me?" Hannah smiled and led him down a long corridor. "We have been studying your service record, Lieutenant. Not your achievements, but your methods. Do you know what makes you different from other officers?" "I make mistakes?" "No. You make choices that do not follow patterns." Hannah stopped in front of a large window that looked down into a training facility. Most soldiers, when faced with a decision, follow procedures they have learned. Their choices can be predicted with reasonable accuracy. But you, she turned to look at him, you improvise. You make decisions based on instinct and feeling rather than calculation. Our psychological models cannot predict what you will do next. Jun-Ho frowned. That sounds like a weakness, not a strength. It would be, in a normal war. But we are not fighting a normal war. Hannah began walking again and Jun-Ho followed. We are fighting against beings who have spent millions of years perfecting the art of prediction. They know what species do when threatened. They know the patterns of rebellion and resistance. Every strategy we might use, they have already seen and defeated. So you need people who do not follow strategies. Exactly. Hannah opened a door and led him into a small office. We need people who cannot be predicted. People like you. Over the next few months, Jun-Ho learned the truth about humanity's situation. He read the extinction schedule. He studied the history of species that had tried to fight the conclave and failed. He understood, perhaps for the first time, just how small and fragile humanity really was. But he also learned about Project Rewrite and its strange methods. The training was unlike anything he had experienced in the military. They did not teach him tactics or weapons. Instead, they taught him to think in ways that defied logic. He studied chaos theory and random number generation. He played games where the goal was not to win, but to be impossible to predict. He learned to trust his instincts even when they made no sense. The Conclave's models work because most beings are rational, explained his instructor. A woman named Captain Sora Bay. She was an intelligence officer who had spent 3 years undercover in Conclave space. And her eyes held shadows that Jun-Ho did not want to ask about. They want to survive. They want to prosper. They want to protect their families. These desires create patterns that can be calculated. And humans are different? Sora shook her head. Humans have the same desires. But we also have something else. We have hope that does not make sense. We fight battles we cannot win. We sacrifice ourselves for ideas that have no practical value. We believe in things that logic says are impossible. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. The elder races lost this ability long ago. They became so advanced, so optimized, that every action had to have a purpose. They forgot how to be foolish. They forgot how to dream. Jun-Ho thought about this for a long time. He had always considered himself a practical man. He liked plans and procedures. But he also remembered times in his life when he had done things that made no sense. Staying up all night to watch a meteor shower. Giving his last money to a stranger. Falling in love with a woman who lived on another planet. Maybe that irrationality was not a weakness. Maybe it was the most human thing about him. Meanwhile, Sora had her own mission. She returned to Conclave space, disguised as a merchant selling exotic goods from the outer colonies. Her real purpose was to gather information about species that had discovered their own extinction schedules. What she found was not encouraging. Over millions of years, hundreds of species had learned about the Conclave's plans. Some had tried to hide. Some had tried to fight. Some had tried to negotiate. All of them had failed. The Conclave's models simply adjusted to account for whatever response the species chose, and then crushed them with precise efficiency. But Sora noticed something interesting in the historical records. Species that accepted their fate peacefully were eliminated slowly, almost gently. Their populations declined over generations until they simply faded away. Species that fought were destroyed quickly and brutally. Their worlds burned and their people scattered. Either way, the result was the same. The Conclave's predictions always came true. Sora returned to the secret station with a troubling conclusion. Fighting does not work, she reported to the council. Surrendering does not work. The Conclave has seen every possible response and planned for all of them. Then, what do you suggest? Asked Admiral Taiho. He was older now, his health failing, but his mind remained sharp. We need a third option, Sora said. Something they have never encountered. Something that does not fit into their categories of fight or surrender. The council debated for days. Some argued for building secret weapons. Others suggested hiding in the depths of space. A few even proposed accepting extinction with dignity. It was Junho who finally spoke up. He was still new to the council, still unsure of his place among these brilliant people. But something in him demanded to be heard. What if we helped them? The room went silent. Everyone stared at him like he had lost his mind. The Conclave expects us to be enemies, Junho continued, his voice growing stronger. They expect us to fight or beg or hide. But what if we became useful to them instead? What if we gave them something they needed? Dr. Hana nodded slowly, understanding. Make ourselves essential. Change from a threat to an asset. They would never trust us, said one of the generals. They do not have to trust us, Junho replied. They just have to need us. And once they need us, destroying us becomes costly. It was a simple idea, almost naive. But it was also something the Conclave had never seen before. No species facing extinction had ever tried to help their executioners. Admiral Taiho looked at Junho with new respect. This young officer, this impossible variable, might have just given them their first real chance at survival. Lieutenant Choi, Taiho said, I think you have just changed everything. The seeds of humanity's greatest gamble had been planted. Now they just had to wait and see if they would grow into salvation or simply delay the inevitable. Either way, humanity would not go quietly into the darkness. They would rewrite their fate or die trying. And somewhere in the cold calculations of the Conclave's prediction machines, a tiny error had appeared. An impossible variable that refused to fit into any equation. His name was Junho Choi, and he was about to become humanity's greatest weapon. 10 years had passed since Project Rewrite began. The Conclave had started moving against humanity, just as the extinction schedule predicted. Trade agreements were canceled. Diplomatic missions were rejected. Human ships found themselves unwelcome in ports that had once been friendly. Most humans did not understand what was happening. They blamed bad luck or politics or economic changes. Only the members of Project Rewrite knew the truth. The Conclave was slowly tightening a noose around humanity's neck. Admiral Taiho Kim watched it all from his command center. He was 80 years old now, and his body was failing. Doctors gave him less than a year to live. But his mind remained clear, and he had one final plan to execute before death claimed him. Are we ready? He asked the assembled council. Ambassador Minji Kang stepped forward. She was 45 years old, with warm eyes and a gentle smile that had disarmed opponents in dozens of negotiations. But beneath that soft exterior was a mind as sharp as any blade. "The technology is complete," she reported. "Our scientists have developed a new form of energy generation. Clean, efficient, and more powerful than anything currently in use. It will revolutionize power systems across the galaxy." "And the hook?" Minji nodded. "The technology works perfectly, but it uses principles that are incompatible with existing power systems. Any civilization that adopts it will need to gradually replace their old infrastructure. Within 2 generations, they will be completely dependent on our methods." Taiho smiled. It was not a weapon, not exactly. It was a web. A connection that would make humanity essential to the galactic economy. Destroying humans would mean destroying their own power systems. "The Conclave will see through this eventually," warned Dr. Hannah Lee. She was ancient now, confined to a wheelchair, but her mind remained the sharpest in the room. "Yes," Taiho agreed. "That is why this is only the first part of the plan. Minji, you know what to do." Minji bowed respectfully. She had been preparing for this moment her entire career. 3 weeks later, Ambassador Minji Kang stood before the conclave of elder races. The chamber was vast, filled with beings so ancient and strange that human eyes could barely comprehend them. Some were made of light. Some existed in multiple dimensions at once. Some had forms that changed constantly, never settling into anything recognizable. They looked at Minji like she was an insect that had wandered into a palace. Small, insignificant, soon to be crushed. She smiled at them warmly. "Honored members of the conclave," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Humanity comes before you not to ask for mercy or to beg for time. We come to offer a gift." The elder races stirred. This was unexpected. Species facing extinction usually came with threats or pleas. They did not come bearing gifts. The eldest among them, a being called the Watcher, leaned forward. It had no face that Minji could see, but she felt its attention like a weight pressing down on her mind. "What gift could your kind possibly offer us?" Minji gestured, and holographic displays appeared around her, showing the specifications of the new energy technology. "We have developed a power generation system that is 30% more efficient than any current method. It is clean, stable, and scalable. We offer it freely to all members of the conclave." Silence filled the chamber. The elder races communicated with each other through methods Minji could not perceive, but she knew they were discussing her offer. "Freely?" the Watcher finally asked. "No conditions?" "None. Humanity wishes only to contribute to the prosperity of the galaxy." Minji kept her smile in place, hiding the tension she felt. "We have always admired the wisdom of the elder races. We wish to prove ourselves worthy of your respect." It was a lie, of course, but it was a lie wrapped in truth. Humanity did want respect. They just planned to earn it through necessity rather than admiration. The conclave debated for 7 days. Their prediction models struggled with this new information. Younger species did not give gifts. They competed and fought and hoarded resources. Generosity was not part of their programming. In the end, curiosity won. Several civilizations agreed to test the new technology. If humans wanted to give away their discoveries, why not take advantage of their foolishness? Minji returned to Earth with a diplomatic victory that no one had expected. But she knew the real work was just beginning. Back at Project Rewrite headquarters, Commander Junho Choi studied the situation with growing concern. The energy plan was working, but it was too slow. It would take generations to create the web of dependency they needed. The conclave might decide to eliminate humanity before then. "We need something faster," he told the council. "Something that makes us essential right now, not in 50 years. What do you suggest?" asked Captain Sorabe. Junho had been thinking about this for months. The answer seemed crazy, but crazy was exactly what they needed. The elder races have been predicting the future for millions of years, he said. Their models are incredibly accurate. But accuracy requires data, and data requires stability. What happens when they encounter something truly chaotic? Something their models cannot process? Hannah leaned forward, interested. They would struggle. Their predictions would become unreliable. Exactly. And if that happened, they would need someone to help them understand the chaos. Junho looked around the room. They would need us. Humans are good at dealing with unpredictable situations. We evolved in a dangerous, changing environment. We adapted to chaos while they were optimizing for order. Sora shook her head. The galaxy is stable. There is nothing chaotic enough to threaten their models. Not yet, Junho agreed. But what if something appeared? Something so strange and unpredictable that even the elder races could not understand it. Admiral Taiho, who had been listening silently from his medical bed, suddenly laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound, but there was genuine joy in it. You want to find a crisis, he said. Something that will break their predictions. And then you want humanity to solve it. Yes, sir. Taiho nodded slowly. It is insane. It is dangerous. It is probably impossible. He smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young officer he had been decades ago. In other words, it is perfectly human. He did not live to see the plan executed. Admiral Taiho Kim died 3 months later, surrounded by friends and colleagues who had dedicated their lives to his vision. His last words were simple. Surprise them. The council mourned him briefly and then returned to work. There was no time for grief. The extinction schedule continued counting down, and humanity still needed a miracle. They found one 5 years later. Deep in unexplored space, survey ships discovered a region called the Hollow Expanse. It was a place where the laws of physics seemed to break down. Ships vanished without explanation. Planets flickered in and out of existence. Signals became distorted and meaningless. The Conclave sent their best scientists to investigate. All of them failed. Their models could not explain what was happening. Their predictions were useless. For the first time in 100,000 years, the elder races faced something they could not understand. And humanity had exactly the people to help them. Captain Sorabe assembled a team of Project Rewrite operatives. Commander Junho Choi would lead the expedition. Their mission was simple. Enter the Hollow Expanse, figure out what was causing the instability, and prove that humanity could solve problems the elder races could not. It was suicide, probably, but it was also the best chance humanity had ever had. As Junho's ship prepared to depart, Minji Kang sent him a message. It contained only 3 words. Surprise them. Live. Junho read the message and smiled. Then he ordered his ship into the unknown. The gambit had entered its final phase. Either humanity would prove itself essential to the galaxy, or they would die trying. There was no middle ground. But that was fine. Humans had never been very good at middle ground anyway. The Hollow Expanse stretched before them like a wound in reality. Commander Junho Choi stood on the bridge of the exploration ship, defiant hope, and watched the stars ahead flicker and blur in ways that made his eyes hurt. Status report, he ordered. Lieutenant Doyun Shin, the ship's chief engineer, looked up from his console. He was a strange man who built machines that worked, even when the physics said they should not. The military had wanted to discharge him for his unconventional methods, but Project Rewrite had saved him. Now he was exactly where he belonged. All systems normal, sir, but the instruments are having trouble. Readings do not make sense. It is like the laws of nature are different here. Captain Sorabe stood beside Junho, her face calm despite the impossibility outside the windows. The Conclave sent 12 expeditions into this region. None of them returned. We need to be careful. Careful will not help us, Junho replied. The elder races were careful. They were precise and logical and calculating. And they failed. He turned to face his crew. We are going to do this differently. I want everyone to trust their instincts. If something feels wrong, say it. If something feels right, even if it makes no sense, tell me. We are not here to be smart. We are here to be human. The ship moved deeper into the expanse. Around them, reality continued to bend and twist. Stars appeared and disappeared. Distances changed without warning. Time itself seemed to move at different speeds in different parts of the ship. Do-hyun worked constantly, adjusting the engines and shields to cope with the changing physics. He did not follow standard procedures because standard procedures did not work here. Instead, he made adjustments based on feeling, on intuition, on guesses that should have been wrong but somehow turned out right. I do not understand how you do that, Sora admitted, watching him work. Do-hyun shrugged. Neither do I, but the universe does not care about understanding. It only cares about results. 3 days into their journey, they found the source of the disturbance. It was a structure floating in the center of the expanse. Not a station or a ship, but something older and stranger. It was made of materials that did not exist in normal space, shaped into forms that hurt the mind to look at. Light and shadow played across its surface in patterns that suggested meaning but refused to reveal it. What is that? Sora whispered. Junho stared at the structure, and something stirred in his mind. A feeling. A recognition. It was like meeting someone you had known in a dream. It is old, he said slowly. Older than the elder races. Maybe older than the galaxy itself. The ship's sensors were useless. Every scan returned different results. The structure was there and not there. It was solid and empty. It was alive and dead. We should leave, one of the crew members said nervously. This place is not meant for us. But Junho shook his head. No, this is exactly why we came. The elder races cannot understand this place because it does not follow their rules. It does not fit into their models. But maybe it does not need to be understood. Maybe it needs to be felt. He made a decision that no rational commander would make. He ordered the ship to dock with the ancient structure. The interior was even stranger than the exterior. Corridors shifted and changed as they walked through them. Rooms appeared and disappeared. Gravity worked in directions that should have been impossible. But Junho did not try to make sense of it. He simply walked, following something that felt like instinct but was probably closer to faith. His crew followed him, trusting their commander even when his choices seemed insane. They found the heart of the structure in a chamber that existed in multiple dimensions at once. In the center floated a device made of pure light and thought. It was still active after countless millions of years, still trying to complete a purpose its creators had given it. Sora scanned the device with her handheld instruments. It is some kind of consciousness interface. I think it responds to thoughts and emotions, not physical input. That is why the elder races failed, Junho realized. They tried to analyze it. They tried to understand it with logic and mathematics. But it was not built for logic. It was built for something else. He stepped forward before anyone could stop him. Commander, wait. Sora reached for him, but it was too late. Junho touched the device. Light exploded through his mind. He saw things that no human had ever seen. He experienced memories that were not his own, from beings who had existed before stars were born. He felt the weight of ages pressing down on him, threatening to crush his consciousness into nothing. But he did not try to fight it. He did not try to understand it or control it. He simply accepted it, let it flow through him like water through an open hand. And somewhere in that chaos, he found something beautiful. A message. a purpose, a gift from a species that had faced extinction and chosen a different path. They had not died. They had transcended. They had become something beyond physical existence, leaving behind only echoes of themselves. But those echoes were unstable, bleeding into normal space, causing the disturbances that threatened the entire region. The device was meant to stabilize the echoes, but it needed a consciousness to guide it. The creator's consciousness had moved on, leaving the device without direction. Junho understood what he had to do. He could not control the device with logic or calculations. He had to dance with it. He had to improvise, create, imagine. He had to be human. He thought of Earth. He thought of his family, his friends, his home. He thought of laughter and tears and love and loss. He poured every irrational, beautiful, painful human emotion into the device. The chaos began to calm. The echoes started to stabilize. Reality slowly knitted itself back together. When Junho finally stepped back from the device, he was exhausted but alive. The hollow expanse was still strange, still different from normal space, but it was no longer dangerous. It was no longer threatening to tear reality apart. "What did you do?" Do-hyun asked, his voice filled with wonder. "I did not try to control it," Junho said slowly. "I just talked to it. In a way it could understand." Sora stared at him. "You stabilized a region that has been destroying ships for centuries. You did something the elder races could not do." "We all did it," Junho corrected. "We trusted our instincts. We did not try to be logical or efficient. We just tried to be human." Word of their success spread quickly. The conclave was shocked. Their best scientists had failed to solve the mystery of the hollow expanse. Their most advanced technology had been useless. But a crew of humans, using nothing but intuition and irrational emotion, had succeeded. For the first time, the elder races looked at humanity with something other than contempt. It was not respect, not yet. But it was curiosity, interest, perhaps even a hint of fear. Humanity had done the impossible. They had proven that there were problems in the universe that logic could not solve. Problems that required chaos and creativity and hope. And suddenly, the extinction schedule did not seem quite so certain anymore. When Junho returned to human space, he was greeted as a hero. But he knew the fight was not over. They had proven themselves once. Now they had to prove themselves again and again, until the conclave had no choice but to accept that humanity was too valuable to destroy. The gambit had worked. Humanity was no longer just a threat to be eliminated. They were something new, something unexpected, something essential. And that changed everything. 20 years had passed since humanity learned of their scheduled extinction. The deadline was approaching. According to the original timeline, humans should have begun their final decline by now, weakened by isolation and internal conflict until they faded into history like so many species before them. But humanity had not faded. They had grown stronger. The energy technology they had shared with the galaxy now powered thousands of worlds. Human engineers maintained critical systems that the elder races had come to depend on. Human problem solvers served on crisis response teams across conclave space, handling situations that defied logical analysis. And yet the extinction schedule remained in place. Tradition was powerful among the elder races. They had maintained their order for millions of years by following procedures that had always worked. Removing a species from the schedule had never been done. Many believed it should never be done. The conclave assembled to render final judgment on humanity's fate. The chamber was the same one where Ambassador Minji Kang had offered their gift years ago, but now it felt different. The elder races no longer looked at the human delegation with contempt. Some looked with curiosity, some with respect. A few with something that might have been fear, Dr. Hannah Lee had requested to address the conclave personally. She was over 100 years old now, so frail that she could barely walk without assistance. But her mind remained as sharp as ever, and her eyes still held that gentle fire that had inspired Project Rewrite decades ago. Commander Junho Choi walked beside her, supporting her with one arm. He was in his 50s now, his hair streaked with gray, his face lined with the weight of years and responsibility. Behind them stood Ambassador Minji, Captain Sora, and a delegation of humanity's finest minds and leaders. They had prepared speeches. They had assembled data and arguments and appeals to logic. But as Hannah stood before the assembled elder races, she set all of that aside. "Honored members of the conclave," she began, her voice thin but clear. "I am told that your models predicted humanity's destruction. I am told that you have watched thousands of species rise and fall, and that your predictions have always come true." The Watcher, ancient beyond comprehension, inclined its formless head. "This is correct. Our models account for every variable. Species that threaten galactic stability must be removed. This is not cruelty. It is necessity." "I understand," Hannah said. "Your order has brought peace to the galaxy for millions of years. I do not question your intentions. But I have a question for you." She paused, gathering her strength. "Your models predicted we would fight or surrender. We did neither. Your models predicted we would hoard our technology. We gave it away freely. Your models predicted we would fail in the hollow expanse. We succeeded where your greatest minds could not." She looked around the chamber at the ancient beings who held humanity's fate in their hands. "Tell me, how many of your predictions about humanity came true?" Silence filled the chamber. The elder races had no answer, because the answer was obvious. Almost none of their predictions had been accurate. Humanity had defied every expectation, broken every model, shattered every assumption. "You built your empire on certainty," Hannah continued. "You survived by eliminating uncertainty. But uncertainty is not your enemy. Stagnation is. You have not evolved in millions of years because you fear what you cannot predict. You remove species that might surprise you because surprise is dangerous." She took a step forward, and Junho supported her carefully. "But look at what surprise has given you. Clean energy that powers your worlds. Solutions to problems you thought unsolvable. A universe that is becoming interesting again after millions of years of predictable order." The Watcher stirred. "You speak as if survival is a right. It is not. The galaxy must be protected. Protected from what?" Hannah asked. "From change? From growth? From the possibility of something new?" She shook her head. "Humanity does not ask to be removed from your extinction schedule. We ask something greater. We ask that the extinction schedule itself be abolished." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. This was unprecedented. The schedule had existed since before most species in the galaxy had evolved. It was the foundation of conclave order. "Let species rise or fall on their own merits," Hannah said. "Let the galaxy become unpredictable again. Yes, there will be risks. Yes, there will be failures. But there will also be discoveries and wonders and possibilities you cannot imagine." She smiled, and despite her age, despite her frailty, there was something fierce and beautiful in that smile. "You have watched for millions of years. You have calculated and predicted and controlled. But when was the last time you were truly surprised? When was the last time you saw something that filled you with wonder?" She gestured to the humans standing behind her. "We can give you that, not because we are stronger or smarter than you, but because we are unpredictable, because we hope when we should despair, because we fight when we should surrender, because we dream of things that logic says are impossible." Hannah turned to face the Watcher directly. "You predicted our fall. We rewrote fate. Now we offer you the chance to do the same. Not as rulers or subjects, but as partners. Not as predators and prey, but as fellow travelers in a universe that is far stranger and more wonderful than any model can predict. The conclave deliberated for 7 days. The debates were fierce. Ancient traditions clashed with new possibilities. Fear of change battled against curiosity and wonder. In the end, the vote was close. 117 civilizations supported abolishing the extinction schedule. 116 opposed. Humanity had won by a single vote. The announcement sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For the first time in millions of years, species facing extinction had a chance to prove themselves. The careful order of the conclave began to shift and change. New voices emerged. New ideas flourished. New possibilities opened. 50 years later, Admiral Zheng Ho Choi stood on the bridge of the Infinite Variable, flagship of the United Species Fleet. The galaxy had changed in ways that even Hannah Lee could not have predicted. The elder races, freed from their rigid traditions, had begun to grow again. Young species that had been marked for elimination now thrived and contributed to galactic civilization. Beside him stood Lieutenant Yaren Choi, his daughter. She was beginning her own career among the stars, part of a generation that had never known the shadow of scheduled extinction. "Father," she said, watching the stars outside the window, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if the vote had gone the other way?" Junho thought about this for a moment. "Sometimes. But I have learned that wondering about other possibilities is less important than making the most of the ones we have." Yaren smiled. "That sounds like something Grandmother Hannah would say. She taught me everything I know about being unpredictable." In her quarters on Earth, the ancient Dr. Hannah Lee sat at her desk, writing her final research paper. Her body was failing, but her mind remained clear. The title of the paper was simple: On the Necessity of Uncertainty, How Humanity Survived by Being Impossible to Predict. She typed slowly, choosing each word with care. The conclave's models were never wrong. They simply failed to account for one variable: that humans, when told their fate is sealed, will burn every equation, shatter every prediction, and rewrite the very laws of probability rather than accept an ending they did not choose. She paused, looking out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, her students and their students were exploring the galaxy, solving problems, making connections, being wonderfully and impossibly human. They predicted our fall. She continued typing. We rewrote fate. And in doing so, we taught the galaxy that the only certain thing is uncertainty itself. She smiled as she typed the final words. The universe is not a machine to be calculated. It is a story to be written. And humanity will never stop writing new chapters, no matter what fate has planned. Hannah Lee died peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by family and friends. But her legacy lived on in every human who refused to accept impossible odds, in every species that had been given a second chance, in every prediction that had been proven wrong. The stars still watched from above, ancient and vast. But they no longer seemed cold. They seemed full of possibilities, full of stories yet to be told, full of fates yet to be written. Humanity had stared extinction in the face and smiled. And the universe, for the first time in a very long time, smiled back.